Hey neighbors, Kevin here with etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Curt A16 fifth wheel hitch with S20 slider base for Toyota Tundras here on our 2017 Toyota Tundra. If you own a Toyota Tundra and you're looking for an all-in-one kit that's going to have everything you need so that way you can tow your fifth wheel trailer, then going with this kit is going to be a great option. It's going to have the A16 fifth wheel hitch head along with the center section, and then that S20 slider base, because with Tundras you're typically going to have a shorter bed and you're going to need that extra clearance so that way you can make a turn without the nose of your fifth wheel contacting the cab of the truck. The best part about this is it's also going to include the base rails and the custom fit brackets that you're going to need to mount to the frame so that you can mount up your trailer hitch. Now, one thing I do want to mention, since we are in a Toyota Tundra, is that typically Tundras aren't going to be your best option whenever you are going to be towing a fifth wheel. Typically the capacities that they can handle are pretty low, so you really have to have that fifth wheel that's going to be a much lighter GVWR. So I would definitely double check what your trailer weighs, figure out what your truck can actually handle, make sure that you're going through your owner's manual, figuring out, because there's a lot of different variables for your vehicle. The type of cab you have, the engine you have, there's a bunch of different factors that go into what that actual capacity is. So you definitely want to make sure that you're going to be able to handle it. You don't want to be right at what that trailer weighs or under it, because if you are, then you're going to overload your vehicle and it's going to end up damaging things and it's not going to be a good time. Now, when it comes to the custom fit brackets, these are going to be reusing some holes in your frame, and if you have a Crew Max cab, then you're going to not be able to use them, because what happens is the cab takes up a bigger portion of your frame, so our cab would be sitting further back, which then pushes everything else back, and then our holes aren't going to line up. So you would not be able to use this kit if you do have that. And if you don't know that you have that or not, you can come and look at your door on the back side of the cab. So that rear door, if it's a full-size door, you most likely have the Crew Max. If you have a slightly smaller door, you might just have the double cab. We can show you what the double cab looks like, because that's what we have with this Tundra. All right, so if we look at our front door here, we have a full-size door, and then when we come back to our rear, we've got that shorter door. We don't have the same handle, and then we also have a much smaller window here with less leg room in the cab itself. So that's a good way to just eyeball it and make sure that you don't have the Crew Max. So the biggest part of this kit is going to be our fifth wheel hitch, and with this one, this is going to give you that extra turning clearance here since it has a slider. Now, this is really easy to work. I've already popped out the pin and clip, which will lock this into the towing position. And even from the outside of the bed, which I'll show you in just a bit later, is you just pop this handle down, really easy. There's some other ones where you kind of got to really pry it out. This one really just pops down nice and slide forward. It locks right back in place. We can make our maneuver, and then we can get back in our truck, pop that back into here, and we're off towing again. Now, this has a lot of the features you've probably already seen, just because A16 is a pretty popular fifth wheel hitch. So we have full articulation, front, side to side, back to back. There's rubber dampeners that are built into the head that are going to help eat up that road shock and any kind of vibration that you have. Help with your chucking, so that back and forth motion when you're kind of coming to a stop, or when you're starting to take off and the trailer wants to kind of fight back and forth with you, or when you're going over those railroad tracks and it's kind of jarring back and forth. So that's built into there so that you don't have to feel that as much through the truck itself. So taking a much closer look at our fifth wheel hitch, one thing that comes with it is a lube plate, which is going to allow you to prevent scratches and make it a much easier transition when you're connecting up to your fifth wheel trailer. This will simply just pop right onto the kingpin, just like so. And then when we come up onto our hitch, it's going to be creating a barrier between that plate on our pin box and the top of our fifth wheel hitch. That way we're not putting any grease on there that can accumulate some debris and make things kind of gross and get it all over yourself. And this just makes it much cleaner and easier to do so. So let's show you how this works. We'll pop out our pin and clip on this. We'll pull the handle out towards us, pop back, and that opens up the jaws. Now when we go to pull this in, I don't have as much weight as a trailer does, so I can get it back a little bit, but I'll have to pull the handle as well. So that would be locked in place, and now we're getting a full 360 degrees around our kingpin with the two jaws overlapping each other by an inch there at the front. Now before we go anywhere though, we need to make sure that we pop our pin and clip back into place in our handle. We don't want to have any issues with our coupler coming unlocked. So we pop that back down and into place, and now we know we're safe to tow. So another nice thing that Curt does is they put an indicator on the back. So right now, Tom is sitting in the driver's seat looking back with the camera, and we can see we have a green circle here, which tells us that we are safe to tow. Now, if we weren't, we would see red, like we saw when I started to push that in, and then also yellow. I'll push it back in so you can see it. So this is with the handle fully back in the coupling mode where our jaws were kind of split open. When we go to put that in, you can see we're not fully into that safe mode. If you were still able to get your pin and clip in, you now need to come back here and look at it and say, oh, okay, we still have got red here, that's not safe. We want to make sure that we're fully into that green, like that. So a couple other important factors here are going to be our hitch height, for one. With this base, it's going to sit a little bit higher just because we are sitting on top of that sliding base instead of just the normal footprint that we'd have. Another factor to consider is because we're using base rails, that's going to add another 1.5 inches as well to it. So at the lowest setting, we're going to have a 17.5-inch hitch height, so that's up to the top of our hitch here. And then at the highest setting, that would be 21.5. And the goal with that is we want to have our fifth wheel trailer riding level with us. So the way to do that is to measure from the ground up to the bed. So we'd measure for that. And then over on the fifth wheel, we would want to get to our pin box. And we're not going to measure up to the kingpin. We want to get to that plate that the kingpin comes down from. So that's this portion of it right up here where that kingpin starts. We want to make sure that we're getting from the ground up to that while the trailer is level. The difference between those two numbers is going to be what your hitch height needs to be with your fifth wheel hitch. The goal along with that is also to make sure that you have at least 6 inches from the top of the bed rails up to the nose of the trailer. That way you don't have to worry about the fifth wheel's nose coming in and damaging your bed rails. The other important factor here is going to be our weight capacities. Now this has a 16,000 pound gross towing weight capacity and a 4,000 pound vertical load limit, so that's that pin weight coming down on the fifth wheel hitch itself. And like I said before, you definitely want to make sure that you're verifying exactly what your truck can handle and make sure you're not overloading it. Now with this being an S20 slider base, if you did upgrade to a larger truck later on and installed base rails, you would be able to swap out the hitch head here, maybe put in an A20 and get that 20,000 pound capacity from both the rails as well as the hitch itself. Now, as far as maintenance goes, this hitch is super easy to take care of. Step one, always use your lube plate. That way you're not scratching up or dirtying up the head of your hitch. It's going to save it and keep it lasting for a much longer time. You might even want to pick a few of these up. These are super inexpensive. I keep a couple extra just for my dad because he's the kind of person that doesn't fully have it where it needs to be, and then he ends up smacking it up against the hitch here and then kind of dents up that ring, and then over time it'll wear down. So super easy, and it's a couple bucks just to save yourself a much larger cost of fixing up the hitch head or maybe your pin box. As far as the jaws go, there's going to be a grease zerk fitting on either side, and those you just want to pump in 1 or 2 squirts every trip. Maybe if you're going once or twice a month. If you're going a little bit more, definitely throw a little bit more in there as you're using it more often. If you're one of those hot shot drivers and you're hooking up to multiple trailers, that would be a good choice for you. As far as the base, so with this, we just want to rub on some white lithium grease and make sure that we're not attracting any dirt or debris that could potentially bind up our slider here to where we wouldn't be able to have it go, and maybe it would catch at one spot, and then now you're not able to get that full 12 inches of extra clearance. Other than that, there really isn't too much more to this. I would definitely recommend, if you can, get a tonneau cover. Cover up your hitch, don't let it get rained on. It's going to last a whole lot longer and you won't have any of those kind of rusted or corroded issues. And then if you're starting to feel like there's too much vibration, maybe things feel a little bit off, the dampeners that are built into the head and in the center section down in here can easily be replaced as well. All you'll have to do is pop out this pin and clip here. You can pull this whole pin out, which allows you to remove the hitch head. Now, it is a little bit harder just because those dampeners are sitting in there. There's like a V shape kind of going down into that, so that when you set the hitch head in, it kind of forces it into that one spot. But that dampener's what I'm kind of catching on here. A few times of moving this in and out, it should be pretty much good to go. But with this being brand new, it's fighting me just a little bit. Once you get that worked in, though, if you do want to remove your hitch and you want to take it out in pieces, you could do that so that you could pop the whole head off. This is just 4 bolts, and these are going to be torqued down. But if you have a torque wrench, you could easily take the center section out as well and then make this a whole lot lighter, because the slider base by itself is pretty heavy. I would not recommend lifting that up just by yourself. I'd definitely get an extra friend to help. That way you can safely put it in and out of your truck without scratching up the bed. So included in this kit is also those base rails and frame brackets. The base rails are going to come with a carbide finish, which is going to help prevent any rust or corrosion, because we don't want to see all that paint starting to flake off in our bed. That's not a good look, and it's just going to lead to further issues down the road. The hardware included is grade 8. Now, with the frame brackets being custom and needing to match up with certain specific spots, you can run into some issues with clearance with the hat channel. There's a few cross members that are going to be in your way, and we actually had to swap out some of our hardware. So on this spot right here at our cab side rail, on both this one and the one over there, we did have to swap that out with a hex bolt, just because we had a cross member that was right below it to where there was no way to get a wrench on it. So you might end up having to change some things around, just depending on what you have going on under the vehicle itself. But that is going to be very specific. You might not run into any issues at all. You might be able to just easily slap this in place and have no problems. But with that being said, I would not probably choose to do this myself outside unless I was a qualified mechanic that had all the extra tools and had the time to really sit here and dig through it all, just because this did require a lot of crow's foot tools and other specialty things that I had to use just so I could get to some of these bolts and get them all torqued down properly. Getting the brackets in place was not easy either, so this is one where I would definitely reach out to a shop, use our dealer locator. You can enter in a zip code and find a shop to get it professionally done and save yourself the headache. But with that being said, please feel free to use this video so that way you can get it properly installed yourself. So starting off our install, first step is going to be removing our spare tire, so that way we have some room to work. Once you have that done, we're going to be taking our side plate for the front on the passenger side. So it's going to be this guy right here, where it's nice and long up the front. It's just got that square piece up top with the rectangle portion more than the slotted portion facing towards the front of the vehicle. And what they want you to do is hold this up, and we're going to find the hole, which is this guy right here, and we're going to enlarge that. Now, when I went to pull this up, it's not really sitting how I would like it to, so we're going to skip some of these instructions and just double check that we are getting this exactly how we want it to by drilling our holes up in the bed with the base rails first. So as you can see, like for me to get this lined up with this other hole where it's supposed to be, it really isn't giving us a straight shot at that bolt hole. So it might be that the hat channel is in our way, and we might have to cut a little section of that out just to make that work. This could just be a year model issue instead of a overall issue. So we're gonna start by going up in and drilling down those 4 holes for our base rail. That way we can line it up and make sure that this is actually where we want it to sit. So like I said, we are going to skip over the frame rail brackets and start drilling our holes for the base rails, so that way we can line up with the holes down there. So we're making sure we're putting our frame bracket in the right spot, especially since we're going to be drilling through the frame. So for this part, we're going to start with the cab side, which is a little unusual. Typically we're going for the tailgate side first, but the instructions are going to call for 49 3/8 spacing from the end of our bed here. But since we have a spray-in liner, that's going to add about a 1/16 of an inch onto our length here that we're going over, because this goes over the lip of the bed. So I'm going to add a 1/16 on. So we're right at 49 7/16, and I've not only measured from this side, I come back over Measure from this side, make sure that you have this perfectly even both ways. And then I've also gone ahead and I'm going to check my from the wheel well over to it, and looking at this right now, looks like we're right at 3.5. A little bit off here, but it's kind of hard to tell with your wheel well. There we go. You got to make sure you're hitting it at the same exact spot because it curves up. So I'm getting 3.5 right there as well. So we know we're good front to back and side to side. We got this perfectly lined up. So our next step is going to be taking a center punch, and we're going to do the outer 4 holes with our center punch, and then we'll just drill a little 1/8 inch pilot hole down so that way we can see where we need to be. Now that we have this set in place, we can use our center punch, and for the cab side here, we're going to be using the second slot in, so we'll want that for both sides. So we can get that centered, run our punch. Since it's so hard to see my center punch hole when I move this out of the way, instead I'm going to be paint markering it first. That way we can actually see what we're doing. We'll get our base rail out of the way. We've got our spots here. I'm going to hit those one more time with my center punch. It's because this is a really textured pattern. And then we'll take our 1/8 inch drill bit and we will do a little pilot hole here. All right, so we're back under, looking on our passenger side frame rail, trying to line up our bracket. Lines up pretty well with the front hole, but this hole close to our tailgate is a little bit blocked just because we have the hat channel in the way. So what I'm going to do is just notch out just a small section here so that our bracket can sit over it, because we're going to have a spacer that's under it plus one on top of it between that and the bed. There we go. That looks a lot better. All right, now that we've drilled out those holes to show where our base rail is going to come through, this is lining up with the head channel edge just kind of trimmed out. So we can get to actually drilling through the frame rail now and run our bolt through our frame rail mounting bracket so that we can move on to getting these base rails attached. Now that we've confirmed this is the correct hole and it's exactly how we need it, I'm going to step this up to a 5/8 hole. So right now I've got a 7/16, so I'm just going to work my way up to it. That way we're not really having to sit here and drill forever. Now we have that hole enlarged over on our passenger side. The next step is going to be removing this control box right here, and to do so, on the back side there's going to be a nut, and that's going to require a 12mm socket. So we'll pop that off, and we're going to be reinstalling this again, but just with a bracket that's included with the kit, just to get it spaced further away. And now we can slide this out. It's a little rusty, so not really wanting to come out of the bracket here. There we go. Now that we got access to that back one, I'm going to get that one off as well, and then we'll pull this whole bracket off, because it's going to be this black bracket on the back is going to be separate from these two guys. And then once we have our frame bracket up on here, the new bracket that we have, which is this guy right here, this little Z-shaped bracket, is going to mount up with the hardware that clamps the bracket to the frame rail. All right, so they had us remove that electrical connector and then put the bracket in. Bracket's nowhere near it. There's no way for me to get that electrical control box over to where they're saying to mount it with this bracket, but it's honestly right out of our way, so I think I'm just going to reinstall it back with those factory nuts, and then we'll just skip this part for now. If we do run into an issue later on, we'll probably have to just fabricate something to make it work. I'm seeing a lot of inconsistencies with the instructions versus what we're actually seeing with the vehicles. This might actually just be a trim package issue, but if you're going to put it for, you know, each model, it should really match up. And in this case, I'm just not really seeing that too well. So We're going to keep chugging along though. I marked out my hole because this bracket is going to line up with the hole inside there, and I was just under the truck and I could see that my holes were matching up from the bed. So I just marked this out. We'll center punch that and then drill that out because it's also going to need to allow for a 5/8 bolt to go through. So I've hit it with the center punch. Now I'm going with my 1/8 inch drill bit and I'm just going to work my way up all the way to 5/8. So we just drilled that hole down on the frame rail on our driver's side. Now they want you to come back up into the bed and we're going to enlarge our holes that we have. So the 2 on this side and the 2 on the passenger side as well for our base rails. And we wanted to get that up to 9/16. So I'm going to be going, skipping around through the bits just till I get up to that 9/16 just to make it easier. So each way we're just only chipping out just a little bit each time. So once you have that cut out, you'll want to come back and just file and keep vacuuming, kind of make sure you got this all nice and cleaned up, no burrs that'll potentially hang up on your hardware. So I think we're good on this side. And then once you are ready, we're going to put some clear coat on here. That's going to help protect that bare metal from us drilling. So now we're going to drop in our carriage bolts along with our U-shaped spacers. We're going to slide that right into place. And we'll use our carriage bolts to make sure that we are installing our frame brackets right where they need to be. All right, with that in place, now we can go back down under the vehicle. All right, I'm on the driver's side right now. If you don't really have enough room, you might need to pull those carriage bolts just back up before you get the plate in, but we're going to try and get it with it down already. When you hold it like this, and we're going to slot it in and then turn it to get this in place. Because there's a lot of other stuff in the way here. Yeah, so I'm hitting that carriage bolt. I might need to just pop it up just a bit. There we go. Get some wiring here, we'll work around. All right, now we're going to be using our larger hex bolts. We're going to throw a flat washer on it, and we're going to slot that through, get that lined up with the side. That way it'll help hold it in place, so that way when we go under fully and put on the nuts and plates that go on the vertical bolts, we won't have any issues. Same thing with this. A second one of these with a flat washer. On the other side, we're going to be using these offset spacers. So it's these guys right here with the square bit a little bit further out. It's not just centered on there. These will slot right on there, and then we'll have larger flange nuts that'll go on those bolts. And that's going to be on the inside of our frame rail because our frame rail is a C-channel. So I'm going to wait and we'll lift it back up. We'll get under there so we can see everything and get everything tightened down. Now for our side bolts, the horizontal ones going through the frame rail, we're going to be throwing on these offset spacers. That one in. That one in. And these are going to clamp onto it as we tighten it down with those flange nuts. Which we want the larger ones. I get that started, and then I'm going to tighten and torque this down to the specifications listed in the instructions manual. It's going to be just a little bit too hard to see just because I'm going to have to be right in the way of the camera here just once we get to that point. And since these aren't carriage bolts on the side, you will have to have a wrench holding the head of it. Otherwise, it's going to keep spinning like it's doing to me right now. All right, so now we're going to do the same process over on the passenger side as well with our front bracket on the cab side here. And it's going to be just those offset spacers again, along with a flange nut. Now this top one up here is going to be a nightmare. There's not really any room to get in there, and we've got a bunch of other stuff in the way. I might need to trim out this rail just slightly just to get this on. But this is the factory hole, I do believe, so it's not like it was something that we chose. There we go. We lucked out. It does actually work, but getting a socket on here probably not gonna be the same. All right, we lucked out. We don't have to actually do anything special. We used a chrome socket and we just barely fit in place there, so I'm gonna get my torque wrench set up and we will get these torqued down. We tried, I mean, it was super tough to try and get it from the inside, so I did end up having to come towards the outside. We had a wrench with a 15/16 socket on the nut, and then we torqued it from the bolt head side just because it was just impossible trying to get our torque wrench in there. So you might have to do the same at home depending on how much space you got there. So we did have to make some changes on the bolts on the tailgate side. So I've already got this one dropped in. We're going to be doing the same thing over on the other side as well on the passengers. So the carriage bolts that they give you, unfortunately, come out in a spot where there's no way to get a wrench onto the nut at all, just because it's so tight in the frame with the hat channel right there. So there's no way to torque it down from the nut side, and with it being a carriage bolt, there's no way to get it from the top. So we switched over to some hex head bolts. These are 2 inches, ½ inch by, or grade 8, sorry. And we are dropping those in, and we're going to use that flange bolt because I can get a pair of pliers on it, and then since it is a flange bolt with some teeth on it, it is going to start to bite into that spacer that we have down on the bottom, and we'll be able to torque it from the top. Now that's typically not what we want to do, but in this case this is going to be the only way to safely torque these down. So you may find that if you have that same issue, if you get down there and find that you just can't get your hands or any kind of tool on that nut just because of the spacing there, then switch over. Make sure you go to your hardware store. You want to get grade 8 bolts, and like I said, ½ inch by 2 inches. All right, now we've struggled through. I've had a couple of assistants help me because we needed a second person up in the bed to work on the bolt, because we had just enough room to get the nut up in place and then have the bolt start to go down into it, and it needed to thread all the way in. Otherwise, it's not going to fit if you just hammer the bolt in and then try to get the nut on. So definitely a huge challenge, but now that we have it and the teeth on our flange nut are biting, I'm going to torque this down to the specs that are listed in the last step of the instruction manual. Now we have the front two, or the tailgate side, torqued down. I'm going to get back under the vehicle, and then we will do the cab side here. And then once those are in place, we can switch to our back brackets. So it was really tight on the backside here. We ended up using an 18-inch extension with a 3/4 inch deep well socket so that we could get onto both bolts here. But we've got them both torqued, so now we can move on to those rear brackets. For our rear bracket, we are going to have to remove the bolts holding in our hitch. Now this might not be for every single model. They do make a note of that. Unfortunately on ours, we are going to have to pop out this bolt, these 3 bolts here, and we are going to pivot the hitch on this back bolt. So I would loosen that up just a bit too, so you get a little bit of wiggle room. That way it's not pinched up against the frame here. But we're going to pop those 5 bolts out, and we'll do the same thing over on the driver's side. Now if you have anything that's going to be super tight, I would probably loosen that up. So like they had airlines ran right here, but it was real tight, so I didn't want to risk that kind of pulling on that. So I did cut the zip ties off, and I'll replace those later. But it looks like we're pretty much good on the wiring and stuff. There's enough slack in that. I could probably be fine just with the pivot motion that we're going to do. So I'm going to get these taken off, and we'll get to the next part here. Now I'm going to have my lovely assistant Sam push up on the bumper and hitch here, and that's going to drop down that bracket over there so that we can slide this into place. Definitely going to take a little bit of maneuvering to really get it how you need. There we go. And it's kind of pinched on that. While that's up, I'm going to get the other side, and we're just going to do the same exact thing. Now with that back in place, we can lift this back up, and we're going to use that factory hardware because we got weld nuts on the inside of the frame. So once we push this back up, it'll sandwich in between the hitch and the frame rails. Now you might have to use a pry bar. I just stuck the pry bar inside because we have a rounded one, this guy right here. And what I did was tried to move it around, kind of just jingle it back and forth so that way we can get that hole perfectly lined up. I would probably start with your front ones here when you're putting on the trailer hitch, and then go to those 3 rear ones later. That way you know you got this all set before you go and try and tighten that up. Now we have our frame brackets in place, we need to figure out how to, or what spot to drill through on the base rail so that we can get that mounted up to our brackets. And the easiest way to do that is drop in your 5th wheel hitch. If you already have it there, that's going to give you that perfect measurement because we are going to match right up with our feet. If you take a tape measure, you should be getting 22 inches from the center of the tailgate rail to the center of our cab rail. And then we'll want to just double check. Now it should be pretty good just because we have the hitch in place, but it never hurts to double check just the side to side. So it looks like we're right at 3 9/16. Here I'm about 3 3/8. So I do need to kind of tap this over just a bit and get this lined up properly. 22. All right. Now that that's all good, we are going to be switching to a different hole this time. So instead of the second hole in, we're going to be going to the 3rd hole in. I'm going to mark that just because I'll have to get this out of the way so I can drill. And then we're going to work our way up. I'm going to start out with an 1/8 inch drill bit. Then we'll go down below, just double check, make sure that we're lining up with our frame bracket. And then we can start going a little bit bigger, working our way up to 9/16. So now we're going to be doing the same process. We're going to have our U-shaped spacer and then our carriage bolts. Now our U-spacers will go under the bed between our bracket and the bed, so the rib portion of our bed right here, and that's going to prevent any crushing. Our square spacer is going to go underneath the bracket, and that's going to be followed up by our flange nut. Wouldn't hurt to have an extra hand up top, just pressing down on that carriage bolt, because each time I try to do it, it's fighting me. But you can also try pulling on the spacer. So my camera guy, Tom, here is a genius, and I thought of that as well. Help pull it back, just get it started. And then we'll move on to our next one. So on the passenger side, there will be a wire harness in the way. If you pry up on the push pins that are holding it in, you can get yourself a little bit more space to work with. All right, so I'm snugking these up right now and just trying to kind of get an idea of how we're going to approach torquing these down. Furthest one out to the tailgate here has a bunch of stuff in the way. That's probably going to end up having to be a crow's foot, and we'll come in from here and crank away at it because I can't get a socket on it just because this cross member here is blocking us. Now on the other side, I do have a tiny bit more room. Maybe I can switch over to a short well and sneak it in, but we'll have to try that out. The back side of it, closer to the cab, those ones are perfect. I could easily get right into them and tighten them down. All right, so I was able to get a crow's foot on both front ones here by the tailgate side, but because it's a crow's foot, we are only getting a small turn each time. So torquing this down can take quite a bit. So we have to keep resetting every single turn here. All right, now that we have everything torqued down, I just need to reconnect my harness. I popped it off in a couple places, like I was saying, those push pins, so I pushed that back in. There's one more up top here. We can get back in place, if I can find it now. There it is. I'll push that back down into this cross member. That was in. And then, like I was saying earlier in the video, with this wire or this control box here, we honestly didn't even need to take it off. So this might just be a trim-specific issue where this is in the way, because the way they're showing it, it was sitting way further back here in the way of our cab side brackets. But fortunately for us, it was not in our way. So I'm just going to reinstall those nuts, have that mounted back up, and then we'll be good to go. With everything torqued down, the last thing to do is just drop in your fifth wheel hitch. Make sure that you put in your pin and clip, and then you're all ready to go, and the install is complete. With all that being said, if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right base rail kit, or if maybe the base rail kit's not going to be the right fit for your Tundra, maybe you need to go with something else, just so that you can tow your fifth wheel trailer, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey. Well, that will do it for today's look at and installation of the Curt A16 fifth wheel hitch with the S20 slider base for Toyota Tundras here on our 2017 Toyota Tundra.